Get this, adults with financial literacy skills have 82% more wealth than those who don't. From swimming lessons to piano classes, us parents invest in so many things to enrich our kids' lives. But are we investing in their future financial success? With Greenlight, you can teach your kids financial literacy skills like earning, saving, and investing. And this investment costs less than that after-school treat. Start prioritizing their financial education and future today with a risk-free trial at greenlight.com/Wondery. Greenlight.com/Wondery.
Bombas makes the most comfortable socks, underwear, and T-shirts.
Warning, Bombas are so absurdly comfortable you may throw out all your other clothes.
Sorry, do we legally have to say that?
No, this is just how I talk, and I really love my Bombas.
They do feel that good. And they do good, too. One item purchased equals one item donated.
To feel good and do good, go to bombas.com/Wondery and use code WONDERY for 20% off your first purchase. That's BOMBAS.com/Wondery and use code WONDERY at checkout.
I'm Brett.
And I'm Alice.
And we are the Prosecutors. Today on the Prosecutors. Today is the day. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of The Prosecutors. I'm Brett, and I'm joined, as always, by my grateful co-host, Alice. And Alice, we have so much to be grateful for.
Brett, it's so true. It's so good to be here with you, and I am so incredibly grateful tonight because we are talking about Delphi in real time, and even better, we are doing it on Zoom. We usually record just over the phone, so I don't get to see your beautiful face, with 100 of our fastest responding patrons who jumped on the Zoom call with us within like the hour. I couldn't get people to react this quickly if my house was on fire.
Yeah, our subscription only allows 100 people, and I did not expect it would fill up, but apparently it did.
Apparently we need to upgrade that subscription.
Yeah, I know. We should have done that for tonight. But in any event, yeah, it's a crazy day. I know. Alice, do you want to talk about how you found out about this?
Okay, so today's a Friday, and it was just one of those crazy days. I think everyone was trying to get things done before the Halloween weekend. And so I was literally on the phone from like 7:30 a.m. until a couple minutes ago when we logged onto the Zoom. And I didn't have the news up. I wasn't looking at my phone. I was just working. And Brett texted me this afternoon and was like, stop everything you're doing. Delphi. And I was like, what's happening in Delphi? I'm on a conference call. Tell me. And he did. And immediately we decided to do tonight's show because even though there's not a lot of information out there, I know everyone has been waiting for an arrest in this case. Everyone has been waiting for some forward movement after a lot of leaked documents, a lot of, kind of hush in the shadows of things seeming to happen. And now all of a sudden there's finally something more public. But before there is the conference on Monday, there's a whole weekend to go. And I know you guys have a lot of questions and there's a lot to fill you in on.
Yeah, and that was one reason we want to do this, is just talk a little bit about how this is going to go. And obviously, we don't have a ton of information. Ordinarily, we would just wait and we'd do it later. We're not big breaking news people, but this is the case. Everybody who asks us, what is the one case you'd want to see solved? This is always our answer. And I think for a lot of you guys who are listening out there, this is your answer too. This is the case you want solved. So if there was ever a case that we wanted to try and talk about pretty early on, it's this one. And just to give you sort of, we'll go ahead and throw in all the ordinary disclaimers for anything like this. Number one, there has been an arrest. Number two, the person is obviously innocent until proven guilty. Number three, we don't even know what the guy is charged with. So, take all that. This is a long process. This is not the end. This is the beginning. This is the first step. And we're going to have to see a lot of what comes out here. But don't let that temper your enthusiasm. I think everybody should be enthusiastic. This is a huge deal. Talk about why it's a huge deal. Just to give you some information on sort of what we quote unquote know from public reporting. The name of the person who's been arrested is Richard Allen. I would note for everyone out there, that is a very common name. One of the best lawyers I know is named Richard Allen. He is not the person who's been arrested. So those of you who are trying to find out more information about this guy, just be careful. We've already seen multiple pictures that have been posted online that are not him. So just be careful with that. I think we pretty much know who it is now, and people have drilled down on that. But this is, rumors are going to be running rampant. So just be careful. Apparently. And look, this goes to something we talked about on the murder sheet. On the murder sheet, we talked about how pedophiles and sexual predators and people who prey on children, it's not just the guy, in the dark alley wearing a trench coat who's obviously a sexual predator. Oftentimes you find these people everywhere, and they're your next door neighbor, or in this case, there's someone who works at the CVS, is married, and has 2 kids. And that's just not all that surprising. It appears that he is from Delphi. He is from the area, which is consistent with what we always believed, that whoever did this would be someone who was local, someone who knew the area well. This was their hunting ground, and they would want to be, somewhere they felt comfortable, and it seems like they did. Some people have said, and we haven't confirmed this, and we can't confirm it, and hopefully we'll know more on Monday, that he either lived very close to the bridge, or in addition to living very close to the bridge, he would drive by it every day on his way to work and was very familiar with the area. So that's sort of what we know about him at this time. And like I said, I expect we will learn a lot more on Monday.
And, we often talk about not saying people's names publicly. The reason we're able to say his name publicly is because once you're arrested, the documents that charge you are actually unsealed. The court dockets are supposed to be public to everyone. You have to make a showing to keep things sealed, and it is not enough there's usually some showing to be made that it's sealed. And in this case, that is not what has happened. That's why we know the name. And also, of course, Twitter is afoot with who this person is. But please really do heed that, especially in the next coming days before the news conference on Monday. Richard Allen, very, very common name. Please be careful. Don't point fingers. Don't take pictures or post them anywhere.
And there are some twists on this that are interesting. We're going to talk about Indiana procedure and how things go in Indiana. It's sort of a strange, what's happening right now is strange. So according to Murder Sheet, who is very connected in this case and has a lot of people who have talked to them, according to them, and this is all unconfirmed, they received a tip a couple days ago that someone had been arrested. Now, there are a couple different ways you can arrest someone in the state, in Indiana. In the federal government, we talk about grand juries a lot. In the federal government, you have a constitutional right in the federal government to be indicted by a grand jury if it is a felony. And something that probably could take up an entire Legal Briefs episode, there's a doctrine called incorporation, and certain rights are incorporated against the state. Grand jury is not one of them. So even though we always kind of cheat and say grand juries indict people, grand juries don't actually have to indict people in the states. Pretty much every state has grand juries, but there are 25 or so states that allow for arrest and proceed to trial without an indictment by a grand jury. Indiana is one of them. The prosecutor can either file for an indictment, which would come out of grand jury. He'd go before the grand jury, present the evidence. They would return a true bill, or he can file something that is called an information. And the information can contain a lot of the same information in the indictment, but the prosecutor is filing that, signing it himself. So the grand jury foreman signing it, he is signing it. Ordinarily, if you go by information, there will be a preliminary hearing, pretrial hearing, a probable cause hearing at some point where you have to show we have enough evidence to move forward to have a trial where the jury will decide beyond a reasonable doubt whether or not they are guilty. As Alice said, when you file an information, once the person is arrested or an indictment, that information indictment is unsealed because the public access to the courts and what's going on in the courts is very important. Unusually, this case, there's just been a lot of secrecy. There's not as much public information on the docket as you would think. Some people have said that this person had a hearing this morning. If that is true, then it was done under seal, closed to the public, and it hasn't been put on a docket somewhere. If it weren't for the fact that it's Murder Sheet saying it happened, and like I said, they have pretty good sources, I would doubt it, because that is a very rare thing. And there's a couple things I would say about that if that's true. Well, first of all, let me just tell you something else. So, ordinarily, if you are arrested in Indiana under their criminal procedure laws, if you're arrested under a warrant, you're required to be brought promptly before a court. Promptly can mean all sorts of things. Ordinarily, if you get arrested on Friday, you're probably not going to see anybody until Monday, right? Really bad to get arrested on Friday because you're going to spend the weekend in jail because no magistrates are working over the weekend. Now, if there's no information filed, if this had just been an arrest warrant, for some reason they'd pick this guy up, exigent circumstances, the prosecutor can file for 72 hours in which to file an information, at which point you'll appear before a magistrate. Presumably, this has been either through indictment or through an information is how we proceeded here. Now, if it is the case that he had a hearing today, then one of two things is true. The first, which may be the most obvious and maybe correct, is that small town judges and small places have a lot of power, and if the prosecutor asked him to seal it, he may have done that even though he shouldn't have. And if you're the media, go file something with some appellate court to try and get in. Oh, sorry, it's already happened. That's possible. The other possibility is there's something that happened, or there's some reason they had good cause, as Alice was just talking about, good cause to close the courtroom and do this secretly. And if that's true, that makes you wonder whether this is the only person who will be arrested as part of this. And that's pure speculation. But Alice, I mean, it is if there was a hearing today and it was completely closed to the public, that's weird.
That would be very, very weird because, like we said, in some jurisdictions, the decision to seal a courtroom or to ask to seal a courtroom as a prosecutor doesn't even lie with the individual prosecutor. It lies with like their boss's boss's boss, because it is such a it turns the judicial system on its head, because the judicial system is supposed to be open to the public for the public. And so prosecutors take it very seriously when they ask for a hearing to be closed. Now, what Brett just touched on is really important. If in fact there was a hearing and someone just said here, they don't see it on the mycase.indiana.gov public docket, it's because it's been sealed. Now, some reasons you may have for wanting this hearing sealed, it probably was not a substantive hearing. It's probably an initial appearance that we can talk more about, where really nothing substantive happens. It's to advise the defendant what they're charged of. It's pretty formulaic. It can happen within minutes, but you can imagine if his arrest or what is said during that hearing can throw off or the investigation or the arrest on another co-defendant, that may be a reason to ask for this particular hearing to be sealed. That doesn't happen often, and I'll tell you why. If he was giving, by he, I mean the defendant, if the defendant was giving information that could throw off an investigation or lead to some substantive knowledge of someone else who can be charged, the prosecution has the ability to speak to them outside of the court, which is not public. Like we've talked about this with Klein, who came in for a proffer. Of course, you don't have to agree to do a proffer, but there are ways to speak to the defendant in a way that does not put you on the public docket. So we're telling you all these different things. We have no idea what happened, but we're putting this out there because it is strange enough to point out that the prosecution, if they didn't want this information out there, had other avenues to go. So I don't know if that means there wasn't a hearing this morning, or something happened in the advising of rights, or the defendant's counsel specifically asked that this line of questioning be done on the record before a judge. I don't know. But we're putting it all out there for you to see how kind of unusual this process is.
And, a couple things about that. Number one, Mandy, who's a good fan, had asked us, whether or not the prosecution would have had a lot of role in this, whether or not they would have been really involved in the decision. Absolutely. There's a lot of times cases end up in your lap because somebody got arrested. If somebody's like shooting at somebody outside of a bar, they're just going to get arrested. And then the prosecutor's going to be brought in. And, the prosecutor may say, but you didn't recover the gun, you don't have any witnesses, let the guy go, right? That is not this. This is a 5-year investigation. Everything that happened would have been deeply coordinated. This arrest would not have happened unless there was some exigent circumstances. They know he's about to destroy all the evidence. They think he's going to kill himself. He just bought a one-way ticket to Thailand. Unless there's something like that, they would not have arrested him until they were ready. So that makes the whole, maybe there's an accomplice thing even weirder, because you would think they would arrest them all at once. You can imagine if the hearing was at 10 o'clock. Look, this is an initial appearance, right? I mean, this is very bare bones. When you appear, your initial appearance is basically a judge tells you why you've been arrested. They arrange for you to get counsel. They tell you, they find out whether or not you got enough money to afford one. If you don't, they appoint one for you. They don't even take your plea at the initial appearance unless they combine that with the arraignment, which usually happens after you've had an opportunity to consult with counsel. So, but one thing they do is they read the charges to you. If this guy is charged with accessory or conspiracy or something like that, well, that would be a reason to seal it if you don't have the co-conspirator or the other accessory in custody. Now, this is all speculation. Like I said, this could just be small town prosecutor and judge, and the prosecutor says, look, we really need till Monday to get this all together, seal this hearing, and the judge does it and just doesn't care that is completely unusual. And he just says to himself, well, this is an unusual situation, so we'll do it, right? And that may very well be the case. And on Monday, they may say, this is the guy, and he's the only guy, and we're charging him with 2 counts of first-degree murder. Somebody said his bond is at $4 million. I don't know where the person who reported that got that. Honestly, double murder, I would be surprised if he has bond, because there's no circumstance in which he can. The thing about bond is it's high enough to keep you from running, but if you're a danger to the community, just because you have a lot of money, you don't get to be out there being a danger. You can just deny a bond. So I'd be surprised if he even had bond, if he's the only person. And that is intriguing. That is an intriguing part of this, is sort of is he it? We've always thought there was one person, but obviously there's been some weird stuff that's happened lately. We have to talk about Keegan Kline and all that. And you have to talk about, think about this. And we said this before, and I stand by this. If Keegan Kline was talking to these girls under a fake phishing account with the intention of going out there and sexually assaulting them, and then some other pedophile randomly, completely, unattached to him whatsoever, found them first. Number one, what a fallen world we live in, right? You talk about just an indication of how awful things are out there. The fact that 2 different predators independently of each other could have been hunting them on the exact same day is just mind-blowing, which makes me think either Kline is utterly full of himself and lying, which is possible. Like, he could just be lying. I don't know how he'd pull that off, because it seems like the police know he's connected to the Anthony Shots account, and they know that he had these communications with them. Or I think he may have some sort of connection with this guy. And that's real speculation. But it makes you wonder if this is sort of like a little bit bigger than just one person randomly finding some girls at a bridge in a park. And I don't know, but there's enough weirdness going on right now that it makes me wonder.
And here's another thing that's weird about it. Typically what you will see sealed are subpoenas and search warrants, because no arrest or charges have been filed. And so you haven't reached the end of your investigation. It's very possible that you'll issue a subpoena or issue a search warrant and realize this person's exonerated by it. So you don't want someone's name attached to a search warrant, because it's an investigative tool and it's not actually the end result of your investigation. But what we don't see sealed is an entire indictment once the person's been arrested. Now, we've brought up the possibility that it's a conspiracy, that there are multiple perpetrators. If that is the case, what we do typically is unseal the part of the person, the name of the person who has been arrested, and redact the other defendants' names. This happens all the time. Brett and I have lots of big conspiracy cases with lots of drug dealers, and you'll have 10, 15, 20 people on an indictment. And as people get arrested, it's like a flurry of activity. You'll have the first indictment and it redacts 19 names, and then someone else gets arrested within the hour. Then we have 18 names redacted, but 2 names are now public because they've been brought to court. That's typically what happens when you have multiple perpetrators in the same indictment. And it's very, very risky, like Brett just said, if you believe there are co-defendants and you don't file them within the same indictment. There's no double jeopardy or anything like that. You don't have to file the charging document, information or indictment, with both of their names or multiple names on the caption, but it's very typical to do that. And if you were to do that, there's ways to redact the charging document so that the identity of the person who hasn't been arrested is not known yet.
And let me just say, we keep harping on this, and maybe it's going to be nothing. And I don't want anybody to discount the small town judge, small town prosecutor thing. I just don't want you to discount that. Alice and I don't practice in Indiana. Where we practice, you would never do this. I mean, you would never. We can't seal a hearing. I mean, if the judge says he wants to seal a hearing, we're supposed to object vociferously, because of the right of the public and the right of the defendant to have it in public, right? I mean, the defendant doesn't want everything to be done behind closed doors either. I mean, this is openness and transparency in the courts is really important, and you're supposed to have. I mean, my arm can't go high enough in the Zoom box for how important this is. If we want to seal something, like Alice said, I mean, we got to go to the absolute highest authority to get permission to do it. To seal a court appearance. It's one thing to seal a document. It's one thing to seal an indictment. All indictments are sealed until arrest. But as soon as the arrest is made, the very first thing that happens is the indictment is unsealed. That is the very first thing. And it's weird. And yes, it's possible that this is purely because they want to have their big press conference on Monday, and they don't want all the information getting out before them because they want to control it. That's possible. Maybe the judge thought that was good enough, but it's interesting, and it's not insignificant. It may not mean anything, but I am intrigued by this turn of events.
Yeah, I agree with you. Someone asked earlier if it's enough of a reason that there's a lot of public interest around this case to seal it. Typically, that alone is not enough. You have to show that it's going to affect the case, because you're going to have interest. It's good to have interest in the case. The whole purpose of things being public is because the public can have interest. This is their courts. This is their society. They're allowed to know what's going on. Now, I have a few thoughts on this. If, in fact, the prosecutor knew this was happening and they were arrested today, it would indicate to me that there was already a charging document on file. And this is not the situation of, say, a DUI or a domestic violence event where the police go out and because of exigent circumstances without a charging document, arrest someone. And all of a sudden they got arrested on a Friday night because they had a wild night out, and they're sitting in jail for 3 days before their initial appearance on Monday. That would surprise me if that's what happened here. But the fact that he was arrested today, but there's not going to be any public conference about it until Monday, and we don't see anything on the docket, does make me wonder if what Brett just said is what happened. The small town, do me a solid. We need to get him arrested on a Friday so that we have a couple days to get our ducks in a row, inform the family so that they're ready for the conference, that we give them a heads up after we've gotten all the legal stuff out of the way, the actual arrest, the initial appearance and whatnot. That is very uncommon, but I don't think the first situation happened here. I don't think he was arrested on an unrelated charge, like a DUI or a domestic violence charge. And then they're like, wait, that's our guy. Give us time. We need to get our, act together, because now that we have him, we can't let him go. I don't think that's actually what happened, because let me say one other thing. There is a lot of legal stuff that has to happen before someone's arrested. When you file that charging document, there's an arrest warrant that issues with it. That arrest warrant goes to the arresting authorities. Could be federal, it could be local. I don't know which one is who was at issue here, because even if it is a local state charge, the feds can get involved sometimes in certain circumstances. The U.S. Marshals help lots of jurisdictions when it is a particularly dangerous person, or they've been involved in some other way because they're law enforcement helping each other. So just because you may hear the feds are involved in arresting someone, it doesn't mean that it's necessarily a federal charge. But with that said, just because an arrest warrant issues, and that's sealed, by the way, on the docket, an arrest warrant is sealed until it's executed, meaning the person's been arrested. Just because that issues doesn't mean that within the next minute or the next hour, the person's arrested. Sometimes there has to be an entire plan that comes together. If there's going to be a SWAT team, if there's going to be some coordinated plan to decide where to arrest him, that has to go through a planning process with law enforcement. Because remember, they may want to make sure that the public is safe. Let's say that this person works in an office building with a lot of people coming in and out, maybe a service sector type of job. They don't want to, say, arrest a doctor who is in the middle of his busiest time of day when there are 30 patients in the waiting room, because that could lead to a lot of danger to innocent bystanders. So they have to first know who they're arresting and how to go about it in a way that is safest for the officers and also the public. And second, there's officer safety, of course. You may think, most people are not going to resist, but you never know. Even people who have no criminal record, who may have white collar jobs, ones that you may not think of as people who would turn violent in the event they are arrested. And so sometimes the law enforcement can get these things together really quickly, especially if they've coordinated closely with the prosecutor and they know the arrest warrant is coming. But other times it could take days, sometimes even up to a week, to make sure they have the right coordination among different jurisdictions, if there's different jurisdictions, to execute the arrest plan in the best way possible. So it's possible that this arrest was supposed to happen earlier and the arrest plan didn't come together until Friday. Again, we're laying this all out for you to show you what could be delaying or affecting the timeline in a way that has nothing to do with, when a press conference happens.
And let me just say this. someone had asked, could it be that they're sealing the details because what happened to the girls was so terrible and they want to protect them? This is obviously a great day for the families. This is a great day for justice. But one thing that will come to an end now very quickly is the privacy of the girls and secrets about what happened. I mean, everything now will be public. I mean, they're going to have to talk about it in open court eventually. You can't seal the whole thing, and they're going to have a trial, and all of it will come out. And even if a lot of times the worst photos are not shown to the public, they're only shown to the jury. You see that a lot. That'll probably happen here. But what happened that day and the descriptions of what happened that day, we're all going to know. And that's the really bad thing for the families that's going to happen. You would hope, and the thing you always hope, is that when the person is arrested, they decide to plead guilty and they spare the family that. They spare them the trial where all this happens. And we'll just have to see what happens there. One thing I would say, you never know, obviously, unless you're working in the prosecutor's office. You never know exactly why an arrest happens when it does. Given the amount of time and effort that's gone into this, I think they would not have made this arrest unless they were very confident in their case. Doesn't mean he's guilty. Doesn't mean he'll be convicted. But I don't think this was some fly-by-night thing. I don't think this was like, some jailhouse informant said it's that guy and they just went and arrested him. I think they took a long time to build their case. They've been very quiet. The police have been very quiet for a while. For a while, you were getting regular press conferences. You were getting press conferences on the anniversary. And that all just kind of stopped. And people were critical of that. We were critical of that to some extent. But it makes me wonder if maybe for a while they've been developing this. Now, the Klein connection, some people might say, well, look, and I actually think this is true, that the fact that they were talking to Klein, he was trying to cut a deal, and then this guy gets arrested, it makes me think they're connected. It makes me think Klein had some information. However, there is another possibility. When you arrest someone in a case like this, and you're going to prosecute it, one of the things you are always thinking about is defense strategy. What is the defense going to say? What's the defense's best argument going to be? How do we counter that? Alice and I had a 3-year-long investigation that resulted in a 2-month or 1-month-long trial with 100 witnesses. And we spent a really long time thinking about that. And when the answers came up, well, the defense is going to do this, the defense is going to do that, we thought about ways to counter that. We interviewed more people. We tried to dig up more information. We sought more records, whatever, right? One thing the defense attorney is going to do is every single person that you have ever heard accused of doing this crime, the defense is going to say, how do you know it wasn't that guy? How do you know it wasn't Klein? How do you know it wasn't Ron Logan? How do you know it wasn't, the other guy who got arrested for sexually assaulting the 12-year-old girl? Like they're gonna say there were all these other people and the police couldn't clear them, so that's reasonable doubt. Because if it could have been Ron Logan, that's enough to acquit my guy. So it could be that what they were doing with Klein for so long was eliminating him and anyone connected to him and ensuring that they could say definitively in a trial of the guy they actually thought did it, we looked at this guy, we ran every lead down, and he didn't do it. I mean, that's a possibility, big possibility. So that could be the reason you heard so much about Klein when you did.
And also remember, the reason you want to be very sure of your case before you file a charging document is because you can no longer use the grand jury and certain investigative tools once you charge someone. Of course, you can keep interviewing people. Klein could have come in for a proffer, but if they wanted to issue subpoenas for documents and take certain investigative steps in the cloak of anonymity, that all goes away when a case is publicly in court. And also that timeline starts ticking. You have a constitutional right to a speedy trial. And of course, those can be delayed if the defendant consents to a delay in the trial, but they can also rush the trial if that's a tactic for some defendants, is to say, no, I want a trial within 60 days, and they go to trial and they're entitled to that. And so that's why we talk about being sure of your case. Really, honestly, we are investigating cases until like closing arguments, because you can never know everything, but you need to be like almost all the way there. And you need to know what lines of investigations you're cutting off when you file that charging document. And so that's a great point about Klein. I mean, it doesn't change anything about what he has come out about him, like, because he definitely was, I think, catfishing these girls, which is terrifying. And like, as a parent and as a woman, I am terrified and never want to go out in public again. But I do wonder if it was crossing off a very obvious reasonable doubt hole for this particular defendant in trial. So, I mean, we'll see. And also, they are both from Delphi, so it's not a big town.
Yeah.
I personally think there's probably at least some connection or, information sharing there, because what are the odds of these two guys who are like so close to each other?
Somebody asked if, not on this chat, but somebody asked somewhere else, if Klein's not involved, is he going to be able to sue for defamation and get a bunch of money? And it's like, no. The only good thing about having someone who's been charged with multiple counts of producing child pornography is they have no reputation to damage. So you can say whatever you want to about him. And he's going to go to jail for a very long time, hopefully the rest of his life. So I don't think we have to worry too much about him, whether he's involved in this or not. Well, Alice, go ahead.
Sorry. And one other thing, another possibility, we've said this before when we talked about Klein's proffer. It's also possible that he is lying, and here's why. Because he is charged with all those counts of child pornography, and he is facing life, if not longer, in prison. And so he may know someone who was catfishing the girls, and it may not even have been him. I mean, truly, these are his reasons for lying. Why would anyone take credit for catfishing these girls? He could be just BSing the prosecutors and trying to get some sort of a cut on very, very serious charges that he's been charged with, because separate and apart from the Delphi case, whether he had anything to do with it, the guy is facing a very, very stiff sentence in court. And like we said, child pornography cases, because it's all ESI, it's all electronic, there's file paths. It is not hard to prove that he was the one with the child pornography, that he was the one using it. And those cases almost never go to trial for that reason, because the proof is so locked up. And it's also usually so horrendous that people don't want that out in the public.
Somebody asked what I'm drinking. This is my Basil Hayden 10-year, which is the same bourbon that we drank, Alice, when we won our last case. It's my celebration bourbon. So I opened it up again for tonight, because it is worth celebrating. I mean, look, I know everybody, this is such a big day. I mean, it really is. I was sitting at Texas Roadhouse eating lunch, which is my favorite restaurant. I go there whenever my wife's out of town because I can get away with it.
It's so true. Brett took me there a couple times, and like the bartenders knew his name. It was the middle of the day. Yeah, they did. It's true. But I was sitting at the bar and like it just tearing up. And I didn't expect that, because we do these a lot and we talk about really bad things, and often it bothers me on sort of a deep level, particularly when it's about kids, but it's never really affected me emotionally. But this just today was I have been very concerned for a very long time that we'd never get here. You didn't want to say that, because this family has struggled mightily, and they have kept the faith for 5 years. But I have been really worried we'd never get here. And, I don't want to get ahead of myself, because like I said, this is the beginning, not the end. We got so far to go, but it's just, it's a great day. And I can't wait to hear more about this and hear more about how the police got to how they got here. And hopefully hear some of the evidence. I mean, look,
let me caution everybody on this, since I've said this before in other cases. If they don't want to tell us anything right now, that's fine. Okay. If they don't want to tell us anything, that's fine. We'll learn about it in trial whenever that happens. Give them some space, let them prepare. They got a lot of work to do between now and jury selection. Selfishly, though, I would love to hear, this is a lock solid case, and here's why. Though they'll have to be careful because, look, I mean, this jury selection is going to be tough in this one, right? I mean, it's going to be tough. They're probably going to have to go to Indianapolis or something, maybe farther. I don't know.
And I was going to say, and that may not be far enough because of all the law enforcement that was involved in all the media coverage, right?
Yeah.
And so we also say this to caution you, right? Help the prosecutors. We say this as prosecutors. Help them, stay off Reddit for now. Stay off Facebook for now. They've done the arrest. They've done the work. You're not going to help them convict him. They can't use whatever sort of evidence you think you're finding online. And so honestly, the best thing for the public right now is to sit back and let them do their jobs because they have done their jobs so far. I am praying that they know what they're doing, and I think they do, and that this is a lock solid case because there's one shot, right? Double jeopardy applies, and I believe that they've done their due diligence because of all the scrutiny that's been on this case. Thank you to all of you and everyone who has taken an interest in this case because it is incredibly rare to have an arrest 5 years after a murder. Usually when it's been that long, there's never going to be an arrest. So this case already is, has shot out of the stratosphere of the statistics, which is fantastic. I'm so happy for the family, and am hoping for justice at the end of all of this. So I will be patient, even though I want to know what all the evidence is. But this trial is not going to be closed. It's not going to be sealed. I would be shocked if it is, and everything's going to come out at trial. So we will find out in due time, and I'm going to practice patience because what I really care about is that the person is brought to justice, whoever is responsible for their deaths. And if that means waiting a few more months to, understand what the evidence is, I think we should all be willing to do that.
And when the trial happens, we will be covering it closely. We may have to do something like we did with George Floyd, where we cover it in real time. But yeah, and one thing that was striking to me, and we had said this before, Kelsey had always said, when something happens, you'll know from me. And the very first tweet I saw about this was from her. And that was like, I mean, she just tweeted it out there and there'd been nothing else. And I was like, well, that's interesting. And then just the floodgates opened. And from that point forward, we heard everything we heard. So yeah, a lot of long nights and rough road ahead, but today's a good day, and I'm glad so many of you guys could join us to celebrate, and I'm glad we could talk about this. Well, Alice, is there anything else you want to add?
Can't believe we have so many friends.
I know
this is so great.
So great.
It really, thank you guys for invigorating us and for wanting to know about this. I think it's great. This is something that we should all understand about our own judicial system, about our law enforcement. The fact that you guys follow this so closely and care about these very, very important questions gives me hope for civics, across our society. Now go out there and, educate others as well about our law enforcement system and our judicial system. And there's going to be a lot more to cover. But what I can tell you is even if what happened this morning was sealed, the rest of the proceedings will not be sealed. If this case isn't going to go away, if there is a plea, it will be on the public docket. Parts of the plea agreement potentially could be redacted, but you will know if there's a conviction in this case. The only way that doesn't happen is if there's some pretrial diversion situation where an indictment is kept under seal, under an agreement that charges will be dismissed if the person abides by being a good citizen for the next year. That only happens in first offenses, super minor offenses, this person stole, misused a credit card for $100 and they've never done something like that before.
This guy's
it's
not
not
getting
going to happen
diversion.
here. This guy is not getting pretrial diversion. It is not a right that you have, just like a plea is not a right that you have. What you do have a right to is a trial. So there is no way in any world that the prosecution will have gotten to this point and accept, a pretrial diversion request from this guy. I'm giving you the only instance in which the docket will be sealed and you won't know what happens in this case. You will know what happens in this case, whether good or bad. And we'll keep on top of it for you guys. So just know that. Don't be afraid that this is somehow going to fade into the night. It won't.
Well, that's all we have for tonight. We'll obviously keep you guys informed on this case. I know you'll all be following it very closely. And we'll be back. We'll be back next week with our ordinary normal cases. Those of you who are on Patreon already know what we're doing. And those of you who are on Patreon, we'll be talking to you Sunday night. Live Get Vocal. I have a feeling I know what the main topic is going to be. I could be wrong. I guess we'll find out. But we'll see you guys soon. But until then, I'm Brett.
And I'm Alice.
And we are the prosecutors.
I want to say this, but we're not Taylor Swift. I love Taylor. Did you listen to her new album?
So I did.
And
be
careful what you say.
I feel like Taylor, it was like she listened to Olivia Rodrigo and was like, I can say the F word in a song? Because then like every song has the F word in it.
It's
and I'm like,
very explicit.
You never really did that before, and now you do. And it's not like it bothers me. I just thought it was funny. It was like, she discovered a new word and she's going to use it.
I know. I agree with you because usually I can like get away with like playing it on Alexa. My kids don't realize that they're not listening to Flippy. But like you can't play that because there's like a lot of F-bombs and they would definitely